Common 4-bet mistakes. 4-bet strategy, the real job. Your 4-bet is not a vibe play. It is a range construction decision under stack depth, position, and opponent incentives. In online pools, the biggest failure is not sizing. It is psychology. You over-bluff into ranges that are already uncapped and high density. This is how you torch expected value while multi-tabling and letting tracking software autopilot your aggression. Mistake 1, over-bluffing. Into nutted ranges. You see a 3-bet, you click it back with a suited ace and you call it strategy. That is not strategy if villain's 5-bet range is strong and frequent. When villain 3-bets from a position that is naturally tight, their range is more linear and already contains a high share of value. Your bluff, 4 bets, run into a 5-bet range that is uncapped and your fold equity collapses. Expected value model. Bluff, 4-bet, expected value. Expected value equals fold percent times pot minus 1 minus fold percent times risk, adjusted by post-flop equity realization, R, when called. If fold percent is low and your R is poor because stacks are shallow and ranges are tight, the bluff is dead. Most players choose bluff combos using the wrong logic. First, they pick hands with playability like 8-7 suited that do not have relevant blockers and unblockers. Second, they ignore that their 4-bet range should often be polarized versus wide 3-bets, but more linear versus tight 3-bets. Third, they 4-bet hands that would realize equity better as a call when R is high and fold when R is low. Core mental model, you cannot print by bluffing into a range that is already built to continue. If villain has a strong continue strategy, your bluff needs elite blockers and unblockers, correct sizing, and a plan against 5 bets. First, good blocker candidates depend on positions and pool tendencies, but the principle is stable. Second, prefer combos that block strong continues and do not block folds. Third, avoid hands that only look good post-flop but get denied realization by stack-to-pot ratio. Example pool error. Button 4 bets. Too many suited trash combos into small blind or big blind, 3 bets that are mostly value. Rake drag makes the thin bluffs worse. You are not balancing, you are donating. The poker place exploit framework. First, the exploit, 5-bet more often for value, and flat more in position with hands that have high equity realization, R. Let their bluff density burn. Second, the risk. If you 5-bet too wide, you gift them profitable 4-bet jams and isolate yourself versus the top. Third, the counter. If they tighten 4 bets, reduce 5-bet frequency and punish with more calls that deny their equity and keep them capped. Mistake 2, using the wrong range shape. Your 4-bet range shape must match their 3-bet range shape. Versus a wide 3-bet, you want a polarized 4-bet range. You value 4-bet plus a small set of bluffs with premium blockers and unblockers. Versus a tight 3-bet, you often shift toward a linear approach. You 4-bet stronger hands that dominate their continues. Common leak, you copy-paste a polarized chart into every spot. When villain is tight, your bluff bucket becomes auto-negative. Expected value because their continue rate is high and there are few folds to capture. First, wide 3-bet range, more folds available, build some polarity. Second, tight. 3-bet range, fewer folds, bluff less, 4-bet stronger. Third, when you are out of position, your equity realization, R, drops, so your bluff frequency must drop. The poker place exploit framework. First, the exploit. If they overpolarize versus tight 3 bets, 5-bet or call more with strong continues and print versus their dead bluffs. Second, the risk. Overcalling out of position can turn into hope poker if you cannot defend post-flop technically. Third, the counter. If they linearize and stop bluffing, tighten your continue range and stop chasing thin edges into rake. Mistake 3, ignoring MDF and overfolding to 5 bets. When you 4-bet bluff, you are choosing a line that can get attacked by 5 bets. If you fold too much to a jam, you violate your own minimum defense frequency, MDF. Good regulars will pick it up in tracking software. This is why random 4-bet bluffs are poison in tough pools. You need a defend plan. First, which bluffs have the right blockers and unblockers to continue? Second, which value hands can profitably 4-bet call? Third, which hands should have been calls or folds instead of 4-bets? If you cannot defend enough, your 4-bet frequency must drop. That is discipline, not tightness. The poker place exploit framework. First, the exploit. If they 4-bet and overfold to jams, 5-bet bluff at a higher frequency, especially with hands that have strong blockers and unblockers. Second, the risk. Overbluffing jams into an opponent who traps will light money on fire. Third, the counter. If they start calling jams correctly, stop bluff jamming and take post-flop edges instead. Mistake 4. Misreading capped versus uncapped ranges. A 3-better can be capped or uncapped depending on position and tendencies. If villain never. 3-bets their best hands, they are capped, and your 4-bet pressure increases in value. If villain always 3-bets premium hands, they are uncapped and your 4-bet bluffs need to be rare and precise. First, capped 3-bet range, more fold equity, more small 4-bet bluffs can exist. Second, uncapped 3-bet range, fewer folds, use stronger value density, fewer bluffs. Third, out of position, assume you realize less equity. Treat marginal continues as folds, not hope-based calls. The poker place. Exploit framework. First, the exploit versus capped 3-bets, 4-bet more aggressively with a coherent polarized range and punish their inability to continue. Second, the risk. If you label them capped incorrectly, you punt into a tight value range. Third, the counter. If they uncap by adding premiums to 3-bets, reduce bluffs, and shift toward linear value. Mistake 5. 4-bet sizing that breaks your range. Sizing is not aesthetic, it determines whether your bluffs can exist. Too large and you burn risk into the pot while reducing the post-flop edge. Too small and you give position and price and you fail to deny equity. In rake-heavy online pools, medium mistakes compound quickly. First, in position, you can use smaller 4-bets more often, because equity realization, R, is higher. Second, out of position, you often need a bigger size to compensate for lower R. Third, if a size forces you to fold all bluffs versus 5-bets, your strategy becomes face-up. The poker place exploit framework. First, the exploit. If they use tiny 4-bets and overfold to 5-bets, jam more. If they use huge 4-bets, call more in position and trap their overcommitment. Second, the risk. Autopilot, exploiting without stack depth awareness leads to punts when effective stacks change. Third, the counter. If they correct sizing, move back to a baseline and let post-flop execution drive expected value. Scenario box. Hero hand, 8 of spades, 7 of spades. Flop, King of clubs, Queen of hearts, 4 of spades. Action. Online 6 max hero opens cutoff, big blind 3-bets. Hero 4-bets with 8-7 suited. Big blind calls. Big blind checks, hero C, bet D small. This is the standard punt pattern. Your 4-bet bluff uses a hand with weak blockers and unblockers. The caller is not capped. Your equity realization, R, is worse than you think because stacks compress and you have dominated backdoor paths. You are C, betting to make it work. That is hope poker dressed up as aggression. Precision heuristics you use while multi-tabling. First, if villain's 3-bet range is tight and uncapped, your bluff 4-bet frequency drops sharply. Second, if you cannot defend close to minimum defense frequency, MDF, versus 5-bets, you do not have a bluff 4-bet strategy, you have a leak. Third, prefer bluff candidates with strong blockers and unblockers and avoid pretty suited connectors like 8-7 suited as default 4-bets. Fourth, out of position. Assume lower equity realization, R, and cut marginal continues. No set mining with pocket 4s without the right price and implied odds. Fifth, use linear versus polarized ranges as your first decision node, not your last. The poker place exploit framework. First, the exploit. Tag over bluffers in tracking software, then widen your continue range versus 4 bets using value-heavy lines. Second, the risk. If you widen blindly, rake drag and variance will punish you. Third, the counter. If they tighten, revert to baseline, and shift expected value generation back to post-flop edges. Key takeaway: 4 bets are not for governance. If you keep bluff, 4 betting into tight, uncapped, value-dense ranges, you're volunteering to play a low fold equity, low equity realization, R game. Build your strategy from linear versus polarized ranges. Protect your minimum defense frequency, MDF versus 5 bets, and select bluffs using correct blockers and unblockers. Your goal is clean, expected value, not action. Now, let's test your edge. Question 1. According to the article's expected value model, what key factors determine whether a bluff 4-bet is profitable? Answer: fold percent, fold equity, the pot you win when they fold, the risk when they continue, and your equity realization, R, when called. Explanation. The article frames bluff 4-bet expected value as fold percent times pot minus 1 minus fold percent times risk, adjusted by how well you realize equity when called. R. Question 2. How should your 4-bet range shape change versus a wide 3-bet compared to a tight 3-bet? Answer: versus wide 3-bets, use a more polarized 4-bet range, versus tight 3-bets, shift more linear and bluff less. Explanation. The article explains that wide 3-bets create more fold equity, supporting polarity, while tight 3-bets have higher continue rates, so bluffs become negative expected value and you should 4-bet stronger hands. Question 3. What does the article warn will happen if you 4-bet bluff and then fold too often to a 5-bet jam? Answer: you violate your own minimum defense frequency, MDF, and become exploitable to frequent 5-bets. Explanation. The text says good regulars will notice you overfolding to jams, often via tracking software, and attack your 4-bet line with more 5-bets. Question 4. In the article's definitions, what's the practical 4-bet adjustment versus a capped 3-bet range compared to an uncapped 3-bet range? Answer: versus capped 3-bets, 4-bet more aggressively with more fold equity. Versus uncapped 3-bets, reduce bluffs and rely on stronger value density. Explanation. The article states capped ranges can't continue with enough strong hands, while uncapped ranges contain premiums and therefore fold less and punish loose bluff 4-bets. Question 5. In the scenario box, why is 8-7 suited described as a standard punt pattern as a 4-bet bluff? Answer: it has weak blockers and unblockers, the caller is not capped, and your equity realization, R, is worse than you think with compressed stacks. Explanation. The scenario notes you end up C-betting small to make it work, which the article labels as hope poker, driven by poor blocker quality and low practical realization. Study hard, play smart. That's it for now. I'll see you in the next lesson.